We are MythVision. We're going to talk about consciousness and evolution today with our good friend Hani over at Critical Faculty. For those who are not familiar, go subscribe to his YouTube channel. He does stuff in Arabic and English, and he's a science freak. Let's just call it what it is, right, Hani?
Well, I'm a bit of that, all right.
You're into science, all right. You talk to major scientists, Lawrence Krauss and Shermer, and of course any and every academic scientist you can get your hands on. You do so. You also have this weird channel named MythVision at the bottom as a recommended playlist. I'm a little jealous of whoever that person is. It's just, I don't know. We got to work something out here, Hani. It's mind-boggling. Welcome to MythVision again, my friend. I seriously appreciate you, and I look forward to what we discuss today because I've come to realize over the past few years, we evolved. But not only that, people can support us here at MythVision's Patreon, however you want to pronounce it. And of course, there's so much coming. My mind is blown because I'm always having to edit something new. Help us out, support us. There's so much content. You can go in there and early access to a bunch of material, get the scholarly questions and have a video made with your question being asked in 4K. Where's my camera? Yeah. I go and a lot of times I interview these scholars in person, Canon R5C, do it in 4K. It shoots up to 8K, but my computer does not like 8K for some weird reason. Anyway, Hani, what are you going to do for us today, man?
Well, I just want to. I've come to your channel a few times, but for those who haven't watched my stuff before, I just want to introduce myself properly. My name is Hani Saleem. I live in Melbourne, Australia. I've got an academic background in psychology and philosophy. I've got a master's degree in philosophy, so philosophy is my passion. However, I've come to the realization that philosophy and the abstract mind can only take you to a certain degree in terms of knowledge. But a certain knowledge, especially a very, very strong epistemic method, is that of empiricism. You got to actually physically test and prove your whatever hypothesis you're going to be providing. So I'm very much at the moment very science driven, while I still use philosophy to ask questions. I think philosophy right now is the art of asking questions, and I think science is the one who would answer them. So this is where I'm at the moment.
Well, thank you. And thank you for this super chat here, Contextual Religion. I am going to ask, if you want to help out, you can join the Patreon. You can do one-times. You can super chat, ask questions, and we'll get to those questions. I want to try to keep today, Hani, from getting off into the weeds until you've done your first part of this presentation, because there's actually more than one section to this, and we're going to get to that. So any and all support is greatly appreciated, and we will get to your questions and, of course, highlight, recognize you, the whole nine. Just bear with us. So I'm like you. Once it was demons, it was gods, it was spirits, it was ghosts, it was, even venturing on into like, is there such thing as a leprechaun, or are there, mythical creatures? Maybe they exist, things like that, as answers to the problems. And now today I'm like, call me a naturalist. I pose that maybe we just don't understand it at the moment, but I'm going to work with what seems to be the natural world, and evolution really started to make me think in that direction as well. You have said before the show, and maybe open with a banger and saying food is what drove us to consciousness.
Yes. This is going to be my claim, and I'm going to try to prove it throughout the conversation. This is usually a two-part conversation, but I've delivered them recently in a church in Melbourne, Australia, where I've done the origin and the evolution of consciousness and morality. I think they're interconnected, and I've put them back to the origin of the search for energy, aka food, because food is energy, really. That's what food is.
Right.
And I'm going to be claiming that, and I'm going to be trying to prove it.
I'm looking forward to it.
Right. Well, we probably should start with some definitions, because people need to understand what we're talking about when we talk about consciousness. So consciousness is one of those Things are quite intrinsic. They're quite natural. You don't learn it. You don't practice it. It's just there. And that's why it's quite mind-boggling. It's so simple, yet it's the most difficult thing to explain. If I get you to try to explain what consciousness is, you would say consciousness is this, what is in my head, but it's very difficult to put it in words. You wake up in the morning, and you're struggling to wake up, but as soon as you make that first cup of coffee, you start to come to realization of surroundings around you, the clock next to you, and you start hearing birds, and it's morning. You take that shower, and suddenly you can feel the cold water running down your spine, and all that sensation, all that sort of feelings and emotions without you trying anything. It just occurred to you real time. And nobody can explain that. Why would mechanical things like neurons would lead to that, what we call qualia? Qualia is what consciousness is that subjective experience that you cannot qualify. It's just there. You can feel it. You can't explain it, but it's always there. And scientists have been trying to look into that, philosophers and theologians. Well, theologians would call it the soul. In religion, that's your soul, that's your spirit. This is the abstract part of your being, your essence, that is connected to the whole, and therefore it dwells within that vessel, which is your body, but it's way more. This is who you really are, not your body. That's what theologians call it. Philosophies, it depends on what philosophy you belong to, whether you're an idealistic or a rationalist or an empiricist. You might find the consciousness either the duality, like in Cartesian duality, the mind and the body, or if you are like a David Hume type of person, type of philosopher, you would think it's just an emergent property of the complexity of the brain. Today, I'm going to prove it's the latter. It's not the soul, and it's not something suspended from the physical realm of the actual brain. But for that, I want to, so we kind of define consciousness. Now when I talk about consciousness, it's that subjective experience. It's feeling or watching yourself thinking and knowing that you're thinking that you're thinking. That sort of inner mirror in front of another mirror that gets replicated millions of times. On reflect, that's what consciousness is.
Is it another way of saying awareness? Just awareness, being aware.
Well, it's a little bit more than that, but it includes that, because being aware is usually of your surroundings.
Right.
Being aware of yourself, and this is what consciousness is really. It's that subjective experience. It's your inner representation of yourself and the world. Because one of the things that you do, you can close your eyes, and the world is still persistent out there. And that is the presentation, a model being done in the brain to simplify life. And we're going to talk about it in depth. Why do we do that? Because it's very, very important. It's very similar to the problem of free will. We don't have it. It's not there, but it's an illusion, and it's a very, very good illusion to have. We're not the victims. We're the beneficiaries of that illusion. And I think consciousness is an illusion. It is not real. And I'll explain it a bit later, but it's a very, very useful one. So David Chalmers is an Australian philosopher who coined the term the hard problem of consciousness. And he explained it that this is something that is very, very inaccessible, because for you to learn about anything, it has to be an objective knowledge for you to assess it and test it. However, when the subject matter that we're talking about is intrinsically subjective, you cannot tap into somebody else's emotions. You can try to understand them, you can try to relate, but you can never really be in their shoes. Or can you? This is the challenge that we're going to try to probe today and see where we're going to get there. Because empathy people might have claimed, empathy is putting yourself in other shoes. But can you really for sure? And this is going to be sort of a bit muddy. So consciousness is the subjective experience, and it's the limelight within your brain that shift focus on certain things based on what you're interested in at that particular moment. So there's something called focus or attention blindness. Like, for example, I'm not sure if you've noticed, I've actually changed hats several times during the last 10 minutes. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've not. Okay, so a lot of people would have actually scored a question themselves. I go, did he actually do that? And this is what I'm, yeah, you wouldn't, and you wouldn't see it because you were not really looking at it. But if you rewind, you'll find that I've changed hat about 3 times.
Have you really?
No, I'm just screwing with you.
Okay. You're not like freaking me out, man.
But that second guessing is what the problem is, because you're focused on a certain other area.
I'm thinking you have it must have been another black hat, and it must have had a symbol on it that was close or something, and you were like, well, so what I was going to tell you is, and then like that's what I was thinking,
but that's exactly what magicians do. That is exactly, it's called a distraction technique, where they get you focused on something and they do something else. And because your limelight, your consciousness limelight is on something, and they're trying to drive your attention to something, and you wouldn't even notice. There are so many, if you Google, there's so many games about that, and you wouldn't notice the gorilla. It's a very famous gorilla game. It's a dancing gorilla right in front of you. You can't see it because they put your attention onto something else. And that's what consciousness is. It decides what to focus on at the time that is relevant, because otherwise you will not be able to compute or do what you need to do during the day. You need to be able to focus on something and hone on it to complete it, and then shift to something else. And consciousness will do that. Do you have what do you think so far? Intrigued?
No, I don't have any quarrels. I mean, you have subconscious as a descriptive term for things that maybe we're not consciously aware of that are going on, and maybe this category is there for a reason, but at the same time, it's still part of the consciousness game, so to speak.
Correct. Subconscious part of the consciousness, but that's more a psychological game where memories and suppression and it's almost like your RAM. You've got a limited RAM in your head, and you can't operate at 32 gigabyte of RAM all the time. You want to close apps like you've just done recently to make sure the picture is clear. We do that in our brain. We close applications because, or discard them, or put them in the subconscious because they're no longer needed, or they might be traumatic. That's a different story. But that's more of a Freudian conversation. We're going to focus today on the consciousness, the one that the subjective experience. And why is it very difficult to be explained by science? Because science cannot drive that subjective experience just from mechanical processes, because that's what the brain is. The brain is a processing machine of information. So why aren't we zombies? Why aren't we zombies displaying what we need to display? Why do we have that subjective experience? Why do we have emotions? Why do we reflect on pictures of somebody who's no longer there and laugh or cry because they remind us of something? That shouldn't be there if what we're talking about is mechanical processes. Theologians use that as the spirit and the soul because it's such an emotional area, and that's proof that there's something superior, something abstract that is a lot more transcendent than the mechanical self. You always hear about some theists where they actually make fun of atheists and say, well, you're just thinking you're chemical dirt. Well, we think we're way more than that. We're abundance of emotions and transcendence and moralities, and we're way bigger than just the chemical and biological interactions of the brain. But is it? Because we're going to actually try to show that it is not the case.
Okay.
So I'll get you to start firing the PowerPoint because we might have some clues in there.
Okay, let me get sharing the screen, and I'm going to open it up on my phone. Let me mute my mic once I get this thing started so that I don't get any disruptions here. So here we have your PowerPoint. I always love these. They're nice and clean. Let me get slideshow. And I'm going to hit play from start, and I'm going to mute, and I'll keep an eye on the chat the best I can, and just say next when you want me to go next. Sound good?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
So, yeah, so as you can see, there's the two titles are there because there's going to be two parts eventually, but I think they're intertwined, and actually both of them have led me to believe both of them have actually risen in a living organism in search for energy, and that is consciousness as well as morality. So we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to argue in this conversation here that the current consciousness we have here, it's the convoluted, complex evolution of what first started as a very humble awareness of the surroundings. Like anything else in life, and we've seen so far, it starts from a very humble beginning, and then it starts to become complex, and from that complexity, you get a lot of emergent properties. A lot of people think this is impossible, but it's not really, because in biology, we are dealing with something called abiogenesis, and abiogenesis is life emerging from non-life. And by the same token, it is not conceivable that consciousness will arise from the unconscious, or a living organism that doesn't need the convoluted consciousness that we've got here. So I'm going to argue it is. And we can go to the next one, please. Sorry, was that the very next slide, Derek? Or was it one before it? Okay. So what are the steps? What we're going to be talking about here is living organisms. Unless you're a panpsychist. Panpsychists believe that there's consciousness even in a rock. That cannot be proven nor disproven, to be fair. But we're only going to be talking about living organism because they display behavior. And if the subject matter is not displaying any behavior, we're going to be discarding it. So rocks and inanimate, at least for us, will be out of the question because they don't display any attitude or any emotions. So we're going to start with living organisms, and we're going to define what is life. One of my favorite books ever about life was written by a non-biologist, somebody who is actually more of a physicist, and very famously had the conversation with Einstein about whether the cat is alive or dead. That's Schrödinger. Edwin Schrödinger wrote a book called What's Life? And the Mrs. Green model, the 7 characteristics of life, I don't think it was needed at the very beginning to describe what life was. I think life was just 2 characteristics was needed at the very beginning to attribute a living organism as a living thing, which is, I believe, is sustaining itself and making copies of itself. So that's what I'm going to be considering as a living organism. And for that to happen, the organism needs energy to be able to reproduce, replicate. And we're talking about splitting. This is that's the asexual reproduction. To sustain itself, for a cell, it needs to have lipids, which is the membrane around it, and it needs to have the DNA or the RNA in a very simplistic form, and the protein for the functions. All of that will need energy, and energy is usually we know now as food. Can go to the next slide. So I'm going to show you an interesting living organism. Lives in marine areas around shipwrecks and marine aquariums. It's called a Trichoplex Adherence. It's a micropic. It's a very, very small living animal. This animal moves haphazardly, like without any direction, without any intention or intentionality to move towards the food. It actually just moves all the time and only slows down in the presence of food and speeds up in the absence of food. Obviously speeds up so it doesn't waste time, but when there is food around, it will actually slows down. It does not sense, smell, or feel, or know, or have any way to find food other than moving all the time, and only stops when there is a food. So this particular organism does not to be aware, does not have a nervous system, does not have a brain, does not have consciousness. Its only attribute, it moves all the time and it slows down only when there is food. So that could be the beginning. You don't need here anything. You don't need a brain. You don't need a central nervous system. What you need is movement all the time. And you stop when there is food, you grab the energy, and then you keep moving again. You can go to the next one. So, but that's not enough. If this is the only trick for you to find food, you're not highly evolved. What if there is no food for quite some time? So the next thing is to add a bit of direction and a bit of awareness that there's food. So we have something called the Gossia tragina. It's a funny looking worm. It's a flat worm with a funny face. That's the picture of it here on the right hand side. And it moves forward towards food and away from predators. And it uses for that, right on its head, chemoreceptors. These chemoreceptors are able to smell food. However, when the only sensation you've got is sense of smell, your spatial perception isn't there, because smell will not give you a 3D image of the world. It will just give you, it will get excited when you're close to food, but at least you'll have a bit of intentionality to actually move towards the food once you've smelled it. So that's the next step. You keep adding, if you understand what I'm trying to say here, you keep adding bits and pieces of awareness to get to the point where we are at the moment. And we can move to the next slide. So the next part of evolution is adding perception at a distance. And what can do that is adding vision. And when I say vision here, I'm not talking about the vision we have right now. I'm talking about even the evolution of the eye. It takes millions of years, and it starts with just detecting light and darkness, pinholes before the lenses of the eyes, and that would have been enough. But what it does, or even sort of a primitive eye, it adds depth and spatial awareness. Suddenly you are aware of the surroundings around yourself and around the areas where you're going to try to find food. So still remains a problem though. With the vision, you can only think about food when it's in your vision. But if you can't see it, you can't think about it. So, we've got now the movement, we've got the smell has been added, and we've got very primitive type of vision. And that vision adds depth and spatial awareness. But unless the food is within your sensory range, it's not there. It's not there. You can't really detect it. So what is the next thing to add? Once you add something called the inner representation of the world, aka memory, animals can look for food even if not within sensory range. So if you have memory of your last meal and you store that, even though you can't see your food, you will be able to think about it and search for it. It's actually in psychology, it's called object permanence. Object permanence is knowing that there's something is there, even though it's not in sight. Believe it or not, Human children develop that cognitive ability only after 8 months of birth. Baby chicken have that in 24 to 48 hours because they need that. Which means if you hide something underneath the box, they'll know that the stuff is still underneath the box. And that's what object permanence is in psychology. But obviously with humanity, there is a bit of delayed, and this is going to be part of the second part of this conversation about morality, why human babies mature a lot slower than any other mammals. So human development after a month, baby chicken within 48 hours. Next one, please. So with memory is another layer being added here. Once you add memory, means you remembering the past. What remembering the past means you've got past and present moment, which adds sense of time. Sense of time is huge for consciousness. It's absolutely huge. It gives you a 3D image, not just of the world, but of the temporal state of the world. We can talk now about think or remember the past, live the present, and anticipate the future. These three together will give you a 3D image of a model of anything you can think about. It's a very, very huge step towards consciousness, which is going to lead us in a very interesting little lovely bird called the Western Scrub Jay, in the picture attached here. This interesting bird would actually hide its food in a cache once it's got an abundance of it for later on. It will actually resist overeating to store it and being able to eat in the future. It knows the future. What is even more interestingly about this little interesting bird is if it detects a competitor, another bird, watching it hiding its food, it will keep hiding in that particular place and waits until the bird flies away. And the bird thinks, okay, I'm going to go and grab that food from that place. He will actually go and hide it somewhere else after the other bird. He's actually not just anticipating the future. He's actually reading the minds of other birds, knowing that they also want their food and putting themselves in their position. Once you do that, you're adding another layer to consciousness, which is the ability to understand that there are other consciousness around you, that they want to compete for food. They have other desires like yourself, and you can outsmart them, or you can empathize with them because they might be a friend or a part of your clan. So it might be, okay, well, here's some food. So being able to understand what other consciousness might be thinking. Go to the next one. Okay, so that was it. The morality will sort of connect with it, but that is my presentation of the steps, the small steps that will take to the to get to the convoluted human consciousness.
Look,
and you can see,
I'm not going to lie. It hasn't been that long. Do you want to get through the morality since you've already tracked us this far? I mean,
sure.
Should we do a vote here right now? There's 154 people. So in the chat, let's get a 1 if you want to go into morality and have him explain that with consciousness and evolution. Or if you want to go ahead and stop here for a second video at some point in the future where we go into morality and we take Q&A now. So it didn't take him too long. I don't think it'll be too long to get through the second part, maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah, 50. This one is a little bit more complex and it's way more interesting because it's
okay.
But it's probably about 20 to 25 minutes. So we're still going to be done within the first hour and we still have questions.
Everybody's voting, dude, and it's looking pretty good. I got to hit that like button, but also let me know, press 1 if you want to hear about his take here, particularly on the morality point. We got a 1 here. We got a 1 here. A yes. A one, a one, a one, a one. Good to see you in here. Non-believer dynamic constellation. Again, that super chat. You are a boss. Terry Bender. Why not? One. We got a lot of ones in here. So it looks like everybody is interested in hearing what you have to say on the consciousness side. And so are you cool with continuing?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it will quite, it's a nice segue, and I will try to again prove that the search for energy has led to the emergence of morality. So again, morality.
I'm going to mute. I'm going to pop up. We're going to continue on the emergence of morality.
Actually,
and then
before we go to the PowerPoint, I mean, we can just exit the PowerPoint now. So I want to define some terms, because before we get into the subjects, I like to ensure what people agree. We agree on what morality is. Because morality can be explained in so many different ways. To me, morality is nothing but a tool, a human tool, that has been developed over the years to better serve humanity in terms of conservation and social contracts with other fellow Homo sapiens to ensure that the survival of the group. It has not come from heavens. It's been with us from day one. It's the rules of engagement. It's, I'm not going to hurt you, kids. You don't hurt mine. Simple as that. You don't need any superpower to explain to you that without morality, humanity would have not survived. As a matter of fact, animals do that. That's why infanticide, apart from few species, is not widely practiced, and killing their own species is not widely practiced. It's done within the animal kingdom. So you don't need to even be human to realize that there are certain rules of engagement. As a matter of fact, you would see some interesting footages of deers, hippos, crocodiles, and lions when they are very thirsty in Africa. They can be all lined up around the lake drinking. And it's peacetime, because we're not interested in food at this point. We're just drinking. It's almost like that social contract of, we're drinking now. We're not eating, so you can actually
fight in 20 minutes. But let me get my drink. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So we do that.
Just to say, I think that, I think the construct has developed, and you could say that we have really sharpened our skills on trying to create better. Even if it goes contra nature in some sense, we have created models that try to tone down nature, if that makes sense, on how we have these models socially speaking, because it's not about just the individual's pleasure. There's a bigger picture.
We're already gone beyond. There's no such thing as Darwinian socialism. I mean, Dawkins always talks about it, and he said, "Look, we're gone beyond that. We don't need that anymore. We can understand the beginnings and the underpinning urges, but we can now, because we've got that consciousness, we can now write better social contracts amongst ourselves, like Jean-Jacques Rousseau would have argued." So we can do that way better now. Again, you don't need God for any. You don't need anything supernatural. That is a negotiation amongst ourselves, and that's why you get different moralities around the world. What we see moral here. I mean, all of animals. And dogs is probably one of my favorite animals. A lot of people love dogs, but you go to China and you see them sold in the market for meat, and you go, and you go so enraged, But then, if you're a civilization that will think pigs are so smart and never be slaughtered, should never be slaughtered, and then you're here eating a BLT, then who are we to talk about our own morality if morality isn't to our tastes over there, sort of thing? It's quite.
Or like cows are treated as sacred and holy in India at certain places, whereas so it just depends on the compass of the social cultural context, and then go from there. This is good. I'm excited. Are we going to do it now?
So I'm just so morality. Now we've agreed what morality is, and let's display the
I want
slides.
to take one moment to ask everybody who's watching. I've pinned Hani's YouTube channel in the comment section at the top. Please, 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 for the sake of what we do here, and of course, showing love and community, we're setting a higher moral standard on YouTube amongst some of the bigger YouTube channels. Go subscribe to our guest. Subscribe to Hani. Take the moment right now. Click that YouTube channel. Hit that button. Come on right back and join us live. We're not going anywhere. And I'll get started. Give me 15, 20 seconds. That's enough time to go click. You maybe open up a separate window, subscribe, help out our friend here, Hani. All right, Hani, I'm gonna mute, and then I'm gonna go ahead and pop this up and get it ready.
So I'm not seeing the presentation, Derek. Is it supposed to be there? I can't see it.
Oh, wow. I hit it. Share. Hold on.
Already? Oh,
Nope,
now I can see it.
No, I didn't have it shared up on the screen. Here we go.
Morality. Okay, we can straight away. So again, I'm going to be arguing that the rise of morality have emerged from stems from the search for food, energy. We can go to the next slide, please. Okay. So we've defined morality, but we're going to also define it in simpler form for the sake of this mental exercise. I'm going to define morality as incurring costs to yourself, whether it's energy, time, money, whatever, in order to benefit someone else. And the range of that can be as little as being on an airplane and helping a little old lady to lift her baggage in the storage area, all the way to jumping in a lake to save someone's life. These were called moral acts. But it's quite interesting. It's quite intriguing. Why do we have that urge? Why natural selection would have, especially those who read The Selfish Gene by Dawkins and misunderstood it, they will actually think, because actually altruism is actually inbuilt. If you understand properly, it's the selfishness is at the gene level, but there is the kin selection and other type of selections that will actually deem that you could sacrifice yourself in order for the group to survive, or your genes. But why is that urge? Why do we feel good about helping other people? Why do we care about things that will not win us any brownie points, like recycling plastic and nobody's looking? Why do we do that? So I guess I've defined already what's in that slide. You can move to the next one, please. Okay, we're gonna go back to about 500 or 350 million years. And this is a world controlled and governed by reptiles. The brain is made of three different parts. The very ancient, we call it the ancient brain, is the back part. And that's the part that controls instincts, sexual desires, food urges, everything that's primal. And we get the middle brain, and that's your family ties, your emotions, your group dynamics, and then the prefrontal lobe cortex. Frontal lobe cortex is only 2 million years old, and that governs the logical abilities and so forth. This is still growing. Humans by far display the biggest frontal lobe cortex in all mammals. However, when we go back to 350 million years ago, we're talking about reptilian brains and reptilian nervous systems. If you notice a turtle, a sea turtle, uh, uh, laying eggs on the beach, and there are hundreds of them, and the mother will sort of move away and go away, doesn't have any more business, and that sea turtle will have to fend for itself because it's got like 10 to 15 seconds to swim to the water before iguanas and hawks and other predators will grab them and eat them alive. So these animals will have to learn so quickly within the first 15 to 20 seconds of their life, and will probably within the first few minutes of their life will learn every skill they will need forever in terms of hiding, running, doing everything. You want to say, Derek, something?
No, I just think that's it's interesting to think about. It's interesting.
Yeah. And the mother, so the mother would leave the animal, and you will see that in other animal in the animal kingdom. If the babies mature a lot quicker, they don't need the care of the mother. The mother doesn't care because, again, there are lots of them as well. Instead of, if you're a mammal, usually you have a litter. Maybe the maximum is like 8 or 10. But if you are a reptile, we're talking hundreds. Because, you know, probably half of that, if not more, will be eaten. So the rest will make it and will learn very, very, very quickly. The nervous system and the brain of these reptiles are only pretty much focused around the welfare of themselves. It sustains them only. They don't need to care for their offspring because their offspring will learn very, very quickly. So they have a very primitive nervous system that will only look after that particular animal. If that animal does not have the right nervous system to look after itself, it's extinct. It's gone. That is an initial condition needed for the conservation of that particular animal. These animals, they're called ectotherms. Reptiles are ectotherms, which means they regulate their body temperature through the external heat. That's why you see lizards and you know, they're sunbathing. They're trying to observe the heat, and they mostly eat around the daytime. At night, they'll hide, they'll hibernate, they go away to conserve heat that they've absorbed throughout the day. So, and that's why they don't eat they don't need to eat as often. A crocodile might need to eat once a month, and that'll be enough to sustain them. Now, go back to about 200 million years ago. 200 million years ago, something's happened. That was the emergence of mammalian life. Some sea creatures have crawled out of the ocean and found that there is abundance of food out there. And that was the rise of the first homeotherms, the warm-blooded animals. We also known as mammals. Because we're warm-blooded animals, for the first time you can have an open buffet the entire day. You don't need, because what's a homeotherm means self-regulating. The heat comes from the calories you burn. So you can eat day and night. Very, very good. However, it poses a challenge. For a homeotherm to survive, it needs 10 times the amount of food to eat more than an ectotherm. So that's right there, an ecological pressure. It needs to find food. It needs to search for food all the time. And it will need to be smarter for that to happen. So the way nature would react to that is either by making the animals a bit smarter, so a lot more neurological synapses and connections in the brain, make the brain bigger, but that's quite costly, and trade-offs in evolution is quite important. It doesn't happen that immediate. Or have it that the animal mature at a later stage and get smarter, get a nervous system that is designed to learn slower, but learn a lot more over time. So that's why we see the mammals, and mammals is sort of breasted animals, and it will actually care for their offspring and breastfeed them. And the litter is smaller, and there is that care factor. For the first time, the nervous system of an animal is not just designed for the mother or the parents, but it's for me and mine. So myself as an animal and my offspring. And that's why you get that mammalian connection. It's a smaller litter, and you get that connection. And with that was the emergence of the serotonin. The oxytocin, I might say. That is the love hormone. That is the opioid that gets produced by the brain to emphasize bond between mother and offspring and bond and mother. A baby monkey might need the care of its parent for quite some time, but once it's grown up, the learning curve is quite steep. It's quite big. It can learn way more skills, but it needs that first connection between mother and offspring. So this is the first time the central nervous system is designed not just to look after yourself, but to look after someone else. And that's the precursor of morality. That someone else is other than you. So you caring and you're doing something nice for your offspring, but that was not the case before in the reptilian life. So that's the very first step towards morality. You're doing nice stuff for other animal other than yourself. So if you apply that to modern humans, so we're Homo sapiens, about the oldest specimen we found in Morocco some 300,000 years ago. Religions is about only 10,000 years ago. This is the agriculture age. This is where you get all the feminine gods. And you have the hunters and gatherers sort of dynamics, and the communities are getting bigger, and you need to have a law to govern this particular area, and they end up with the class of priests, the shaman, those who would tell you that there is an invisible entity out there that will probably harm you or punish you or reward you if you do certain things. So we know for a fact that religion isn't the source of morality, because religion is only, and we're talking about the non-Abrahamic religions here, some 10,000 years ago. However, humanity is way older than that. So we must have had some sort of code of conduct before religions has sort of broken into the scene, because morality is way before that. So if people, theists who would claim that morality is emerged with religion, that is not true. It's objectively not true, because it must have pre-existed the emergence of religions. So we can go to the next slide, please. So this is what I'm talking about, the social behavior emergence and evolutionary response to the issue about food, which is basically, it leads to the emergence of mammals. You can eat day and night, but you have to eat 10 times more. So you got to delay the maturity of the animal organisms, and you end up with the care factor between mother and offspring. And the ecological pressure being put on the mammals for them to find food. So that pressure has been answered in terms of evolution, in terms of making the animals mature slower, but make the learning curve very, very steep and very, very large. And for that, it requires the bond between mother and offspring. And that's the precursor of morality, doing something nice for someone else other than yourself. Go to the next slide, please. So we talked about this before. These are the maturity, the learning curve between a baby turtle and a baby rat. A rat is a mammal and will learn way more and will need its mother care for quite some time. That's not the case with the baby turtle being in the reptilian family. So there are some trade-offs. In evolution, there's always a trade-off. You get a higher learning capacity, but you get higher newborn dependence on the mother. And that is the care factor. So now the rewiring moves from me to me and mine. Okay, next one, please. So this is the opioids that get introduced to the brain. We talked about the oxytocin. So you emphasize the pain and pleasure systems. That's why when I said, why do we feel good helping other people? Because of oxytocin. You get a very good dosage of oxytocin infused. Once you know you're that guy sitting on a corner and asking for food, and you've got a couple of sandwiches, and you decide to give him a sandwich, and you look over your shoulder and you see the person smiling at you, and you have a brilliant day. You feel good. You go to work, you feel refreshed, you feel you've done something nice, and that's because you've got a very handsome repayment of oxytocin in your brain. We get that. Obviously, it started from mother and offspring, but as society gets complex, because a lot of animals display the offspring mother and offspring bonds, but other animals would have that areas, and we're going to talk about it in a second, in the tribe or in the group, and that group gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You might include your own race, if there is such a thing. There's no such thing as race in science, but it's only one race, which is the human species. But when you do something to even cross species, now humanities caring for other animals, and you feel very good about looking after your dog, and your dog looks after you. Now, this is a telling fact here. Oxytocin they sit on receptors on the brain, and they get expressed, and they wanted to know what causes the monogamy, for example. Why some animals are monogamous. So TT monkeys and the California deer mice are monogamous. And they turned out that their brain receptors, the oxytocin, gets expressed in the areas that emphasizes monogamous relationships. However, if you go to, for example, to the baboons, and baboons are more like a family or tribal type of animals, the same receptors, the oxytocin, are expressed at the group dynamic level. So they feel the same handsome dosage of oxytocin being released when they go beyond their kin. They just within the group of their clan. So we know for a fact now that humans tend to have a very high reward systems around areas of cooperation. There are so many different experiments and tests that will show that in even little children. They feel a lot more when there's a bit of a cooperation system going on. They feel happy, and you can actually see the influx of the oxytocin being emphasized by that social inclusions, while the opposite, social exclusion or rejection by the clan or by the mother, will lead to the decrease of oxytocin, which means an increased distress. So that's the pleasure and pain system completely in operation, making sure that what we think is a moral just act that's suspended, and it's in the abstract, it's actually emphasized by the chemistry of your brain, which means it's hardwired into you from very early stage, because that particular behavior would mean that your group would survive and thrive better when you produce these particular attitudes over and over and over again, like cooperation. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think that was it.
That was it. Yep.
Yeah. So again, the search for energy in both occasions have led to the emergence. Obviously, morality is now taken different because now we can talk about it in different terms, and morality is a lot more complex. But these are the humble beginnings, because everything we talk about in evolution, it's not convoluted. It's very, very simple. So the very simple beginning of morality here is, for the first time, your nervous system is geared up to look after another living being other than yourself. That's the beginning of morality.
There's so much here to get into and actually research and dive deeper, because these are you literally did like an airplane drive-by, just giving us an idea. What I found interesting even at the introduction was just a gradient from non-life to life, is how any abiogenesis scientist, other than the one who's a creationist guy who but he's even not a abiogenesis scientist, but he likes to, because he's a chemist, so he's aware of chemical compounds.
James Stewart.
Yeah, James Stewart. But at the end of the day, they're like, it's super gradual, and you could see even in the complexity. Let's just assume life already started. I don't care if aliens came down with wizard wands or if it gradually happened. Life, we got like very primitive point of life you described with some of those images. And I saw that YouTube video that uses those cartoon images. I watched that video a long time ago on the evolution of consciousness, and it's about food. The whole thing is about hunting and desiring and hiding food and creating memory to know where you stored your food or how to make sure I can get more food in the future, and kind of becoming gradually more advanced to try and make sure you can survive more. And I think that whole spectrum there plays a significant role in almost every area, including the morality point. There's just so many things that kind of come to mind. And I read a book called A Short Something of Life on Earth. Someone recommended, one of my Patreon fans recommended I read it, and I read it, and I got to interview that scholar, because he goes through from the start of life in the sea level, like on the sea floor, pretty much algae and all that kind of stuff, to what we end up having today, and then going in from birds to reptiles to reptiles to birds to all sorts of cool stuff. So I highly recommend people take this stuff further. Before we get into Q&A and asking super chats, is there anything you wanted to mention?
No, I think it's organically now from the questions. We're probably going to end up talking about bits and pieces. But the last thing I want to add is, I don't want people to think because of the beginnings of these things that they're now cheap. Like morality is a cheap thing. It's just, it's a materialistic thing, and it's just a search for food. So we're just us atheists, or making everything that is so valuable to humanity so cheap. That is not what I'm trying to say at all. Morality is very important. It's taken a completely different turn. Now we are aware of it. Now we can seek it, and we can get better at it. Now we can include animals. We can include other species around us. We can be better to us and the planet, and with more information. That's why I don't subscribe to the objective moral truth that God is a moral agent and he's objective, and therefore morality is objective. I think it's subjective, and I think it's changing, and it's a good thing that it's changing, because as more information comes in, you alter your behavior and you do something better next time, because you know better. And I like that. I don't like stagnant anything stagnant is just not nice. I like dynamic change, evolution of things. I think evolution sums up life quite nicely, and entropy and cosmology. You've got two things together. Entropy and evolution will mean that you can never be stagnant. Any static organism will end up being dead. You've got to be on the move. You've got to always change your mind. You've got to always revisit what you think it's real and what you think it's true, and never stay static.
I think the same of religion. If your religion is not changing, don't worry, it'll become a fossil. And that's why I think Christianity out the gate was like the turtle you described earlier. It had to wiggle and run fast. It had to change. It had to learn everything it needed to learn in 48 hours, so that I'm making an analogy to the early church, and continue to evolve and find a way to formulate. And once they set it in stone, you still had heretics that were still trying to push different views. But But even then, there were debates down into the 7th, 8th century on the Christology of Jesus, and then various new things come up. They find different ways to distract themselves with their religion, dumb down people, don't read this book, that kind of thing. But the Enlightenment really, really did some stuff to them. So anyway, let's get into the super chats, and here we go.
Well, you're sorry, you were saying just about the religions being fossils. We actually can see that right now. There are certain gods that can only see them in museums or in DC Comics, and they've been relegated to that. So if these current religions don't do something very, very quickly, they'll soon join their brethren.
Yep, that's true. Contextual religion, thank you for the super chat. Just showing love, keep at it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Experiments in prebiotic chemistry. This is the #1 reason I am an atheist. Consciousness is produced by the brain. No soul, no afterlife, no final judgment equals no God.
Well, my answer to that is very simple. We think now consciousness is definitely coming from the brain, and I'll give a couple of proofs on that, or evidence, I might say, because proof is only mathematics, and you cannot really provide proof. It's mostly evidence right now. The split brain personality. There was a doctor called Chandler, and there's a video, very, very famous incident where an epilepsy patient, when you have epilepsy, they sever the brain. They separate the right hemisphere from the left hemisphere, so the electrical pulse sort of does not continue. And that person was half of his brain was an atheist, and the other half was theist. That's one example. Second example, a person who is heterosexual, married, got a tumor over the amygdala. The amygdala is an area in the brain that function as the moral judgment area. Turned into pedophilia. They operated on the tumor. The pedophilia disappeared. Then tumor came back again. Pedophilia appeared. So, and I can send you guys reference to that. After the show, I'll put it in the comments.
Wow.
Where is the soul in here? If we're talking about a certain behavior that will condemn you to death in this life, and eternal torment at the end of days, of something that you are not in control of, where is the spirit here? Where's the essence?
It's weird you just brought this up. I had a psychologist buddy who's spent 20 years in the hospital. I mean, working with people on behavioral side. I believe it's the psychology part, not the psychiatrist where they prescribe the medicine, but the behavioral. And he was pointing out that people with sexual issues, when it comes to these type of things, usually never reform with these kind of behaviors. Usually, I imagine with a normal brain, if you end up having, or at least meaning no tumors pressing any area or anything like this, I would imagine the point is they don't usually recover from that. There's no cure. And you kind of have to ask yourself, I am not in any way defending them, but it's kind of like, what made that happen? And I imagine ancients would go, he did some sin in his early life, or maybe I don't know, he was in his previous life, he did something wrong and now he's paying for it now. Or I don't, there's crazy ideas to try and come up with what it is. And I'm looking for what's wrong with the brain. And in fact, if you ever watched that Jeffrey Dahmer show, that was out at the end, they wanted to preserve his brain to maybe see if something was wrong with it, but they said destroy it. I would have been curious to know. I mean, obviously he should have gone extinct and, be dead. But you kind of wonder, what would we have learned if we did discover something about his brain or why he behaved the way he did? I don't know.
Yeah. And that will question the soul right there. I mean, if there is something that is abstract and it's suspended from you, why does our behavior completely and drastically change? Not just from tumors. You could have displayed a completely different mood if you woke up on the wrong side of the bed or didn't have your cup of coffee. This is how your chemicals in the brain, just the chemicals. And I'm talking about temporary changing moods. Mind you, if you have just a structural damage in your brain, I mean, who owns that up? I mean, you didn't
Trust
design
me,
that.
I know as a drug addict. And the interesting thing about that, just as we go further into the next super chat here in a minute, is when I talked to another recovery doctor who knows the brain, and he talked about your frontal lobar cortex is not connecting right to your midbrain. So it's misfiring, and your behavior, which is being controlled by what's in the frontal lobar cortex on how you should do things in decision-making processes, aren't connecting proper to your midbrain. And he said, it takes time to heal those neurons on how they're going to fire and how you're going to properly behave to know how to change that behavior. And I called it rewired addiction, my program. But it's like rewiring the brain's process of trying to learn how to behave in the proper way. Sometimes they say you have to act a certain way, even if you don't want to, till you start wanting to act the way you behave. I know it sounds crazy, but it's like,
sounds Christian though. Fake it till you make it.
Well, think about it. Do I want to go to the gym and sweat my butt off for 2 hours when I haven't been to the gym in a long time? I know it's healthy. I know it's good, but do I really want to do it? But once you start behaving and making yourself do it, next thing you know, there's a reward process that comes from it. And that reward isn't immediate. It's a reward that comes from this emergence of consciousness you're describing. But I learned that my decision-making process got hijacked. It almost like the addiction almost felt instinctual, like sex, water, sleep. And if I didn't have it, I felt like I was going to die. So I was willing to do things morally that were not correct, not right, not good for society, which is why I ended up getting a crime charge against me. You do things you wouldn't have done. And now, of course, I want to help others not have to go there. So that's a little more personal, but I figure I would throw it out there just to let people understand, like, when I discovered some of this is what helped me deconvert and realize it ain't demons, it ain't God, it ain't monsters. This is natural. And you can kind of also forgive yourself a little for being a human, an animal, right? Not, oh, I'm a fallen angel and I should have been the pinnacle and the image of God, and like I'm nothing and he's everything, to I'm a rising ape who's trying to learn to live in this world.
That's why, Derek, also our punishment system have changed. It's changed from just being angry with other people and wanting to take revenge and wanting to get even, burning witches to the stake and not suffering them, all the way to the point where the death penalty is being abolished. Understanding that, but you still have to have punishment, because people would say, actually, well, if you're not in control, why punish people at all? Unfortunately, you are that vehicle that is colliding with everyone, and you have to at least separate it and isolate it from the community so that you won't damage other people, or trying to rehabilitate it. So unfortunately, we still have to own even the accidents we were born with, because we are everything, including our brains.
Thank you again, Hani. I really appreciate you joining me. Constellation Pegasus in the house. You two need to get to a Kingdom Hall soon. Armageddon's right around the corner. What you waiting for? Get hot and on it. Thank you so much for the super chat. XJW here being funny. So really appreciate that. Kingdom Hall is not where it's at. The Seventh-day Adventist is. I'm just kidding. Constellation Pegasus again. Is free will and consciousness same illusion? As a determinist, I think the only way to prove free will exists is if these bunch of atoms called humans find a way to leave the universe and continue to live forever. It's saying these atoms decided to leave on their own.
Well, thank you for such a generous Constellation Pegasus is just a wonderful, generous person. I'm a compatibilist. But I'm a compatibilist who believes that there is no free will. But I'm compatibilist for pragmatic reasons. I just don't want to go mad, because even the most determinists will still, after they finish talking about free will, and somebody would ask them steak or chicken tonight, and they go, oh, let me think about it, and still act as if they have free will. So like Christopher Hitchens once said, do you think we have free will? He said, I don't think we have a choice but to have free will. So I think that's the dilemma. So I'm a determinist at heart, but I don't operate life as if I'm determined. I
get
still
it.
make choices and live the illusion, which is, again, according to Daniel Dennett, all these illusions, be it consciousness, free will, morality, everything that we have constructed, they're very, very helpful. They're not bad illusions. They're making sure that life is simple for you. Otherwise, you won't be able to go through your day.
It makes me wonder, I mean, are we meant to know this? Are we meant to understand this? And you look at humans and you see the experiments Michael Shermer talks about in his book, The Believing Brain, and you go, we're even more superstitious than animals, statistically speaking. So are we meant to figure this out? And will this screw us up discovering the fact? And what if the reality, the truth, is a scarier outcome than the let's remain dumb, not try to advance in this respect and just go off a superstition and live in a fantasy. You know what I mean?
Superstition is not that bad. It's the other side of the other thing that we use quite nicely, because that's scientific imagination. Like when Einstein thought about relativity and thought about the thought experiment about free falling in an elevator, that comes from the same area as superstition. It's that imagination, and it can go off whack. So other animals don't have that at all, and therefore they're just going through that linear path, while us humans diverged, and we can go both ways. We can go crackpots, or we can go quite. But I think it's the same side of the coin, or the other side of the coin.
I could talk to you for a long time. I mean, there's just so much to talk about pertaining to this topic. And in fact, I was talking to my wife about this last night. We kind of have routines about how we do things, whether it's breakfast, we go to the gym, we get breakfast, get our coffee. And then at night, sometimes we got a big bathtub in the house we're renting. We just sit there and soak and talk. And we talked about evolution last night. So it's really, and she, even though I've explained it sometimes, last night she said, you did better that last night than you've ever done explaining it. And it makes a lot of sense. You need to record that. And I said, well, just so you know what I explained, I know I got some stuff wrong in the process of explaining that. She goes, that doesn't matter, because someone like me who never understood it, never thought it was true or made sense, you made it make enough sense that it was like baby steps into the door of like, okay, that actually makes some sense of what you're describing. And I'm like, because people like you or Guts at Gibbon might be using terminology or might be like going, first of all, and it's all good stuff. It's just, I'm like having a really tiptoe holding her hand, explaining her way into this whole idea. So,
well, Einstein said once, I think, if you can't explain it to an 8-year-old, you don't understand it. So I think simplifying things is a good thing. That means you actually have a good grasp of the subject matter. So
I'd say enough. I don't feel like it's good. I feel like it's enough to just at least explain the mechanism, the mechanic of why this is what we think now. Pocket Locker 86 in the house. Jay, appreciate the love. Evolution in the house. God isn't real. Happy holidays, Derek. We are MythVision. I had to add that. Like I could have just read it like we are MythVision, but I was like, we are MythVision. Be sure to subscribe to Jay. He came on here the other day and was talking about evolution, and his YouTube channel is here. If we have anybody in the chat that might be a mod, please, actually, while I'm here, I might as well copy and paste it. But yeah, go show the community some love, just like a good primate would. And let's show us some love. Let's go subscribe to our chat here, especially for the support. Jay, we've got some work to do. We've got courses that are coming up, and we've got more work to do. Start educating our fellow humans on planet Earth here. All right, we're scrolling down. Undead Damon, thank you so much for the super sticker. Did you have a comment? Trooping the color. Okay. Thank you so much for the support. I didn't see just appreciate the sticker. Contextual religion again. Hani, can you give me a quick rundown of how evolution explains the move from asexual cells, male and female species, or two? I mean, that's just two. I think male and female species. This is the biggest issue I have with evolution.
Well, In very, very simple terms, and obviously I'm by no means an expert because my studies are not in biology, but the way I understand it is if everything starts at a humble beginning and requires less amount of energy to do. However, if it ceases to be good enough for the survival of species, the mechanism itself, the mechanism of evolution themselves, also evolve. So if this is a mechanism of reproduction, and reproduction, remember we said two things are required for a living being to be called a living being. There are actually seven. It's called the Mrs. Grin, and this is an acronym for the seven characteristics an organism needs to display. But I go with the Schrödinger one, which is the simplest one. An organism needs to sustain itself. So that's the lipid, and the information is kept and reserved. And being able to replicate itself, making copies of itself. The splitting, or making
that's extremely gradual too. Like this transition, like everything else, is just it's just time. I mean, if we had a camera and we could roll it,
I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Because I actually was asked this question. You could tell I don't know. I'm not aware of evolution on the scale of other science-minded folks like yourself, or even far more science-minded like Gutzit Gibbon, Erica, and others who are very aware. But when I had Professor Dave on, we were talking about it. Someone asked, like, if you could go back in time with a camera and like film something happening, and I was like, abiogenesis, and Professor Dave was right. He's like, what do you mean? You're not going to see anything. You're not going to see anything happen. And his point was, you would need millions of years of a camera rolling, and you need to speed it up enough that you could see it in 5 minutes to see something form and like to become something. You just couldn't.
And you probably wouldn't. You probably even wouldn't notice it because there is never in evolution a defining moment. Like there isn't a moment where an ape gave birth to. It's always the same species. There are micro little changes. You can even detect them.
That's why I had the problem in the last live stream about evolution, saying, you know, how this is a threat to any form of theism, unless you think God is like doesn't carry empathy, right? So it's more of a force or a law rather than it being any type of personal entity at all, because all the death that it took for all of these previous models to get to where we are today, so much death, and you got to go like, what we're describing in these texts doesn't work in that model. It just doesn't. This is my walk away. It's like theistic evolution for those who still want to walk away and go, no, I'm still a Bible believing Christian, and they want to somehow save the Bible from evolution. Like, what in the world? God steered all of this, and the process through which he steered it, all this death and really cannibalism of life itself. Because when you can't find just, you know, like that book says, at the bottom of the sea, they're just eating algae and things like that, to turning on its own different species, or bad term, different life forms are eating themselves as energy forms. And now today, I was explaining to my wife yesterday, I was like, literally certain animals are the absolute life which other animals have to eat, rip their flesh, bleed to death, destroy in order to survive. Like it's crazy. It's chaotic in a way if you look at it from this theistic point of view. So
there is a comment by Daniel Whitaker, which is I disagree with. He says sexual reproduction is a strategy to differentiate DNA, not a strategy of reproduction. I disagree, because DNA, it's to carry hereditary attributes, and the final outcome is reproduction, not the other way around. Because, as I said, one of the most important underpinning characteristic of a living being is to be able to reproduce. When the RNA, which is the hypothesis for biogenesis at the moment, that the RNA, which is the one helix, along with the lipids and the proteins, a splitting cell or a splitting bacteria gets attacked by a virus or by another bacteria, will actually cease to exist, because when it replicates identically. With the sexual reproduction, although it takes energy, it takes way more energy, and that's why you've got lots of species who can actually do asexual and sexual reproduction, and they can alternate based on conservation of energy. But with asexual reproduction, you get an interesting mix of male and female DNA that you get more varying genetic pool later on. When you add to that the mutation, which is the errors in the copying, and you get with the T's and the C's, and you get the random errors, and it gets picked up by natural selection because it's got a use, like a quarter of a wing. Eventually, it has a use, and it leads to the evolution of a certain species. But I think the object of affection here is not the DNA; it's the reproduction. The reproduction is one of the most important characteristics of a living being, is to being able to replicate itself. A DNA is a thing that will aid reproduction, not the other way around.
Thank you so much, Contextual Religion. I hope that helped. Experiments in prebiotic chemistry. Hey, Hani, unless I missed it, you forgot to mention Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease. Great response, though.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's again, and hereditary. These things are hereditary, so they run in the family. So,
yeah. Thank you so much for that super chat. Constellation or Contextual Religion. Sorry, I'm so used to constellation giving big numbers. Contextual Religion. Thank you. Eyes are needed to hunt food efficiently, but with how complex vision system is, I'm having a hard time seeing how organisms knew to make this body part without, say, a download or something like that. Not hating. Thank Derek for my skepticism.
This will need another episode in its own, the evolution of the eye.
Right.
So the evolution of the eye can be a full episode, because different species have different types of eyes. We actually don't have the best of eyes. The octopods, like the octopus and squids, have better eyes than us. They don't have the blind spots we have, where the retina is back to front. And I think it's about 12 steps that the eyes have evolved. But we're talking about, when we talk about vision, we're not talking about the vision we have right now. We're talking about pinhole without a lens that will only recognize dark from light. That is the beginning of vision.
Right.
It's exactly like that. And then you get all these types of separate evolutions of eyes. There are some animals that can see infrared and ultraviolet. We can't.
It's kind of, I know this is I always use personal examples in my own life to try and like give analogies. But when I was young and dumb and on a beach trying to, flex my muscles, and I got in this huge fight, all these college guys like were jumping in on our small crowd. They were even recruiting people. Anyway, I get beat up, man. Baseball bat to the back. I mean, they're pounding on my head. I got jumped, right? I started going unconscious, and like I almost literally went unconscious, and then who knows what they would have done to me then. But I didn't. But my sight started fading big time. But I was seeing tunnel vision. Like I could see the light at the end of the tunnel type of thing. My vision was starting to give out, and that kind of crap. And I've had that happen not only with those kind of situations, even drugs, like with heroin when I was addicted. You're almost to the point of complete fade, and boom, you're seeing your vision's going out, things like that. And I hear a lot of people, you're getting choked out. The last thing you're seeing is that little bit of bright light at the distance. It's your sight that goes out. People who are also training for jets in like they're up there in like, what is it called? Mach 3, Mach 4, Mach 5 or whatever. The pressure's so intense. Their sight starts to go out. They go unconscious. So the blood is not getting to the head, or the oxygen isn't getting to the head. And I'm just
remember your eyes is the hardware. The eyes is the hardware, but it's connected to software, and that software is in your brain. So anything that affects your brain will affect your vision. So it's and that's why it's the hardware working with the software. So the more complex the eye vision is, it needs to have the proper software to operate it as well, which is the link with the neurological link between the eyes and the brain.
Contextual Religion, thank you for your skepticism and your support. I really appreciate that. Vaguely agnostic in the house. Appreciate that support, being a member and the super chat. I almost slapped my forehead when you pointed out consciousness started millions of years before religion, so spiritually based morality is a fallacy.
Well, there is no. I don't think there's morality in religion, because for a moral agent to be a moral agent, it needs to be something that was realized from within that particular conversation for the species. The morality provided in religion is called in philosophy the divine command theory. It's provided to you. It's almost like freedom. Freedom cannot be given. It's like if I say I'm going to give you a freedom that actually sort of negates freedom on the concept of freedom. It's a self right that is not given. Once it's given, it's no longer, it's incoherent. And so is morality. Morality is the conduct of people amongst themselves. If it's given from above, because remember that God is quite arbitrary. Certain things that were deemed immoral because God said don't do them, then if God says, oh, but by the way, you're allowed to do them now because I said so, and then they're suddenly moral. Just like slavery was so bad because the Jews were in Egypt. They were never in Egypt, by the way. I'm Egyptian, and I can tell you firsthand testimony that they were never there. The archaeologist, they were not there. But God was very upset that Jews were enslaved by Egyptians. And as soon as they were out, he just told them, well, the Amalekite is fair game. You go ahead and keep the virgins for yourself. What happened to morality then? So we're talking about arbitrary morality based on God's whim. That is not morality. That's called divine command theory. It's by order.
Mm-hmm. Wow, you brought it to religion, and actually this full circles the whole thing. Vaguely, I love this question or this point because I always thought, these arguments from Christians for a while, when you don't really factor in evolution, when I didn't know about evolution, I thought, man, this is a heck of an argument. Like, dude, they got a great point. Christians are right. And then when you learn and you read and you keep reading and you keep learning and you kind of find out a thing or two. So I want a full circle bringing this to religion because, MythVision talks about mythology, ancient religion, and the development. And I definitely factor in evolution now into what we see even in the Bible. And you talk about subjective morality rather than being objective. At one point, you see humans sacrificing humans. Even biblically speaking, God commands, your firstborn son. Mm-hmm. Eventually, it becomes trade-off for something else, which is the best move you can do for survival of a group. But what's interesting is it brings me to that Michael Shermer part in his book, Believing Brain, that we both have read, where they have replica beaks of birds that see the red at the tip. And if you make a fake red that's even more red, it won't even go to the one that's the real thing. It'll go to the fake thing. So there's a sense in which it's like, if I can get opiate rush from showing kindness to my sister or my brother or whatever, that's cool. But if I can get an opiate rush by eating this plant, like, I will go to the plant probably before I go out of my way to try and do some effort to please my brother so that I get opiate effect. And I'm talking about the poppy plant. Let's just use that as an example. So these things get hijacked in these systems that evolve and that we develop, and we call them religion in many ways. And isn't it interesting? You talk about food as the primary energy source. I find it interesting. You also brought up a lot about sex. So sex and food come up a lot. Replicate, keep getting energy. Replicate, keep getting energy. Isn't it interesting that these religions, specifically the Abrahamic ones, and I'm going to go so far as to just start pointing closer towards Second Temple Judaism and Christianity. You can find this in the Hebrew Bible, but in a different way. I'm not even going to waste my time. They're like wanting you to fast, right? There's this huge emphasis on like, don't do the food or bring food to the temple. You got to give God food. And because if we're hungry, God's got to be hungry. And then the other idea is the sex. Like, either procreate to have babies and be saved, as one of the pastoral epistles says, or no more sex. This is actually bad because this goes back to the garden type of thing. It's like built into our stories. And it's like actually harmful if you, in a way, you could kind of say like it's trying to reduce this.
Remember, Derek, I started with the two things that identifies you as a living organism. I said sustaining yourself, and that's food, energy, and reproduction. And religion is sometimes can be actually genius because that's humanity. Right. Finding out that these two elements are so crucial and so important, and it's always. I mean, we haven't gone away from it. It's food, porn, and porn. We're still living in the. We haven't really gone away from these two primal instincts that far. They still dominate us quite a lot. If you go to scroll your YouTube videos, and you'll find, like, even though you're like a moral person, you love your wife, you'll stop without you realizing at certain things that have food or sex, and you don't know why.
But media going like this, and I'll scroll, and some super pretty girls on there, and I'm like, and then my wife goes, "You pause," and I'm like, "What do you mean?
What's for dinner?"
What are you talking about? I kept scrolling. What do you mean? Nice try. Nice try. And now I know why she likes to get all dressed up or tries to like extra pamper herself. She wants to keep my attention, and it's kind of funny that you bring that up.
Yeah, but it's primal. It's I mean, you can say whatever you want to say, but these two things are deeply enrooted in the human nature. It's nothing. It's you can deal with it in a better way. We can make fun of it, but and that's why religion used them quite cleverly, and they control them. If you control these two, you control the person. That's why the biblical, the Torah and the Old Testament, the amount of things that you couldn't eat as a Jew is like, and without even explanation, you can't eat this, you can eat this, and it's like, why would God worry about food? Mm-hmm. What's that to do with anything?
It's interesting. Yeah, they control what you eat. And they have their own reasons and weird in different ways. It's kind of strange in some ways why, but it reminds me of that song, I smell sex and candy. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? I was thinking about that as you were saying. I was like, all right. Maybe they were thinking about our evolution when they wrote that song. I don't know. Yeah. We got another super chat. So I do really appreciate all the support and love. If you have a question, get it in. Because after this, I've got to help a family member, and I don't want to put them on the spot by mentioning their name, but they're struggling with addiction right now. Fentanyl, actually, overdosed many times in the past. And so I'm doing my very best to try and get them into treatment, separating them physically from their environment to give them a chance at changing the cycle that they've been living in. I've had 2 best friends overdose and die in the past, and I don't want to see any other loved ones overdose and die if I can help it. So I got to put on my cape, and I got to go out there and try and save as much as I can. So I really appreciate it. Minder Bender, thank you again for the support. Let's have fun, perhaps at the expense of caution. At what threshold would you surmise an orgasm is conscious? Orgasm. Sex and candy. Here we are. Organism. I said that. Don't take my words out of context. Is conscious. What's your minimum? You know what's on my mind.
These animals that were talked about at the very beginning, the one that uses chemical receptors, they have consciousness, but a small part of it, or and a primitive version that was good enough. Remember, everything you have is good enough for you to survive your habitat. Would our consciousness get even better? Yeah, that maybe the frontal lobe cortex will get bigger. The adrenaline gland will get smaller, so that we're not as emotional. Who knows about the future of the human species? We might actually be a lot more rational, but at what expense? Because there are always trade-offs. Remember, we don't want a very rational society that eventually would like the that movie with Christian Bale, Equilibrium, that we always bring up.
I love that movie.
I love that movie too. I'm not religious, but I still think there's a place for music and emotions and poetry, and it does not have to be supernatural. But you remember that scene where he must kill the puppy because nobody was allowed to keep any art, and he looks at the puppy and freezes and says, "Well, I can't do that."
My favorite part's when he starts to wake up. That's it actually equates to my addiction story, which is why it hits so hard. He starts to wake up, and his own wife, that was where it was like here we are with morality and my empathy, and I was like, his own wife, he then realized what she was, and then the kids, they're little gangster kids, man.
Oh, the horrible kids. But I remember that scene where, because remember they had to have the windows covered because they're not allowed to see any sunset for any emotions to be evoked. And he saw the first sunset, he started bawling and crying. that was like, it's just a sunset, but then it's little things that you take for granted. You know, things like a sunset or watching the ocean from a mountain cliff, and little free things like that make you go, "Well, life is beautiful," sort of thing. You know, you can't take these little things for granted, and that movie is always going to be in my memory.
Yeah, and I hope that what we're doing today doesn't cause people to lose that artistic. I hope they find more of it and find more meaning, and I think that's the hard part, is like thinking of this completely as chemicals, compounds, and this, that. It's like, no, we need to recognize our experience and recognize these feelings and embrace them, you know, and go deep into it.
The two hardest atheists you can think about, Hitchens and Dawkins, whenever they talk about this bit, they are very emotional about it. Dawkins sing Christmas carols in the shower because he loved them. He would join in prayer over Christmas dinner because it's the right and polite thing to do, even though he's an atheist, because he said the words don't mean anything to me, but I want to be kind to those who provided me dinner, and I want to be nice to them.
Thanksgiving dinner, I did the same. I joined in with them, but I didn't pray. They even asked me to. My mom put me on the spot. I got a little bit embarrassed because I didn't do it, not because I don't know how to recite the same things I've said my whole life. It was, I knew people there that would have felt disrespected but mom was like, "I'm just joking." But I got embarrassed a little, like, I don't want to be rude. So I feel you.
Even like Ricky Gervais, like a comedian, English Ricky Gervais, he's an atheist, and he's a full-out atheist. He appears on with I think Sam Harris. He appeared on Sam Harris. He appeared with Dawkins a couple of times, but he always makes sure in any of his series or movies that would insert a scene where he is confronted and challenged as an atheist, either hard atheism or an act of kindness. His mother was dying, and she goes, "I'm going to see you in heaven, and we're going to meet again." And he could have told Mom, "Don't waste your last few seconds by believing in stupid things." But he wouldn't. He would actually say, "Yeah, of course I'll see you in heaven, and we're going to sing." And you have to do that as an atheist.
I mean, like, not everyone sees the world through the same eyeballs, you know? And I appreciate people who do that. I had a friend, one of my best friends, who overdosed, actually. His sister called me and was talking about, well, God must have took him because he was too good for this world. You know what I said? Actually, no. I said, "You're right." She's traumatized. She found her brother. He had like 35 minutes with no oxygen in the brain, and that was it. He was brain dead, but his blood was still pumping, but it was over. And so you gotta learn where to die on what hills, and you gotta be smart about how you approach this stuff. So anyway, thank you so much for that. Bradford Baldwin, where do you place heuristics in consciousness, and how did you assess them in your work?
Well, I've got to say here, and that work that I've done here, it's actually not mine. This is already been provided by Patricia Churchland. So if you go and Google Patricia Churchland, she has lots of conversation. She is a neuro philosopher because I believe the area of consciousness is where philosophy and neurology and hard science can actually meet for the first time. And that work is been done. So that is pretty much her view, and I've adopted it. It makes complete sense. Patricia Churchland, please Google the name. She's Canadian, I believe. She's got wonderful chats about this particular subject. So it just makes sense to me because it connects area of science and evolution, areas that have been, every time we looked at anything that is complex and emergent, it seems to stem from simpler forms. And I think something as convoluted and complex as consciousness could have not just emerged like that, unless it's emergent. Nothing like that sort of comes. Suddenly there are usually smaller steps, and I think it makes complete sense in that sort of narrative that are provided. So, but I'm open-minded because it's at the very end, and I must say it's a hypothesis. We still don't know. Remember, these sort of sciences are more like forensic sciences. We're trying to go back in time, and we're trying to speculate what have happened. And as you said, Derek, if we had a time machine, of course, by the way, just something that's forbidden in cosmology and physics, you can never go back in time. You can go back, you can go to the future, but you cannot go back in time because of entropy, unfortunately. So it's
well, I have
not
an
possible.
anti-entropy machine, so screw entropy. Bradford, thank you so much. And yeah, I've seen this. If you're interested in the video you took some of the images from, that's a really popular consciousness video that has millions of views, a cartoon. And it's all about food. So that they're kind of like giving you a cartoony, fun, very popular level example of how consciousness arrived and why. They don't go into the explanation of eyes arriving and giving you all the details. They kind of explain the process in a drive-by airplane view kind of thing. But thank you so much for that question. Contextual religion says, helping out, bro. Fentanyl. Just don't want YouTube to hit me. But you know what? Heroin, fentanyl, all of it. I actually named a video on my other channel when I was really active on the recovery channel. F my brother's best friends, heroin and cocaine. Because at the time my brother was struggling, and he's open about it. He's overcome it. He's not, dealing with those things today, and I'm proud of him. But yeah, F heroin, F fentanyl, all of this stuff, man. It's
that fentanyl is the drug. We've been hearing some news here from Australia. They found about 400 million doses in the US recently, apparently.
I wouldn't be shocked. Even locally, they caught someone here with, I can't remember how much. Someone was transporting it, fentanyl. I imagine they got it from Mexico. Not 100%. Yeah,
Mexico. They said.
Yeah, it's killing people. Little blue.
Yeah, it's enough dosage to kill the entire American population. 400, if one each take a dose, it can finish.
Yeah. I'm trying to do everything I can to help, but I am one man too. So. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Hengfa or Shai, forgive me if I butcher your name. Does this put to bed the naturalistic fallacy?
So a naturalistic fallacy, if it's natural, then it must be true. Well, you see, the proposition of the naturalistic fallacy is pre-proposing that something is true because it's natural or because it's explained by nature, but we're not doing that. We're not appealing, say, because it's natural, it must be the most plausible way of doing it. But we're providing it. We're providing evidence for it, and we still remain with a little bit of skepticism, saying, well, there could be something else that could have happened in the past, and we're open to that. So we're not really committing naturalistic fallacy by providing a naturalistic emergence for consciousness. It seems to be plausible, and we're open-minded to it. So I don't think we're committing it because we're not saying it must have happened that way.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could reverse it, right? If you wanted to do a theistic fallacy, you could, find a way to. But I think some people just recognize the awe and wonder, and they cannot picture how we got to this point, even if they do try to factor in evolution without some mind or something involved. And I I come at this completely different, and there's a reason I don't draw that model, but I don't know where I'll be at in 10 years. Who knows what I learn or what causes me to step over that boundary into whatever. I want to remain a human who's open-minded to learning and knows his limitations, but thinks a certain model makes the most sense. And this is where I'm at. I mean, and if we keep finding evidence that points in that direction, that model sounds like it's on the right track. I'm not omniscient on its future predictions, or I'm not omniscient when it comes to even the knowledge of these things. But when that model continuously seems to work and be what makes the most sense of the data, I tend to work with that model. And so I don't think we should be like, naturalism is the absolute. And we know it's like, if it works,
it's built a bit of credibility by now. I think, it's every time we look back, it ended up being that. So I'm still skeptic, I'll leave a little bit of a gap, but it seems to be working every time we've used it. It's worked.
Yeah. I don't know. There's so many things out there to learn. Thank you for that super chat. Really appreciate it. And I want to come back to your channel again, and just so everybody knows where to go, I pinned it in the chat, and you can go subscribe right now. Critical Faculty. You have anything coming up on your channel? Do you have any plans in 2023 that you could tell us about?
I was going to have a little bit of a break, but I think in the next few days, I'm going to have Dr. Robert Price. We're going to be talking about Joseph of Arimathea and John the Baptist. Mm-hmm. I've got Lawrence Krauss early next year, and I've got Hamid Abdel Samad. I think I tried to sit you up with him before. He's the most prominent Muslim atheist in the Arabic world at the moment.
Did he? Is he like he's a apostate?
Oh yeah. Okay, and I remember I'll sit you up with him, and we already have a chat. You've already started a chat with him. He written so many books. He lives in Germany, and he's a lecturer in Germany at universities. But this is the sort of guy that when he turns up, there's like a few thousand people watching live, sort of thing. He's very, very. So if you go up above now, again, and to go home, I think. This guy there on top. Here.
This guy. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, send that information. Try and connect me again. I know that he was in contact with me at one point. At least we worked communicating. We didn't talk anymore after that. But so you've got some work coming up on your channel for sure.
Yeah, a bit of English and a bit of Arabic. Again, I'm not trying to do religion, because I think there's enough religion channels that will sort of attack religions directly. I'm trying not to do that because I feel there's a gap in knowledge, and I think once good information come in the head, they will eventually spill out the bad information. So I'm trying to do it organically. I'm not trying to confront, especially from a Muslim background and Christian. But the Muslim background, you don't treat them the same way. That everything is blasphemy, and your head could be gone within seconds. So you try to be not too confrontational, and first of all, to tell them that evolution hasn't collapsed in the West as they claim, and intelligent design is not the reigning scientific theory.
Right.
So I try to do cosmology and science and biology, and so every now and then I touch on religion, but not very confrontational on that.
Yeah, I think I spend a lot of time there. I've had a lot of thought there, and I guess that's why, it's really a. I'm going to use the term because it's Christmas time. It's a blessing that I get to do this and do this full time, and I love to do this. I love to learn about these things and to dive deep, and in fact, I love expanding out into the science realm too, because it is part of that journey. So it's like I do what I love, and I'm expanding my love for more things like history and strange things that aren't so-called underneath the religious topic. I make it relevant. I try to sometimes spin it in to see how this is relevant to what the narrative we've been telling ourselves for thousands of years, or this religion or that religion tells us. But I would love to expand out into Roman civilization, into Greek civilization, into the ancient civilizations and how they arrived at their myths and what we've discovered archaeologically. And I mean, history and science and philosophy and all of these things, I will plan
religion is very interesting. Theology. I mean, I'm not one of those atheists. I love the Bible. This is crazy. I like the Quran because it shows me how we used to think in the past.
Yeah,
this is very valuable, even if we made it up ourselves. I mean, I know it, we've written it, and therefore it's actually a lot more valuable than God written it because it tells me how we used to think in the past. So I'm a lover of human literature, even if it's bad and led to bad things. But how are we going to avoid future problems if we didn't understand lessons from the past? Right. And remember, Islam is 6.5 centuries younger than Christianity. So we're probably going through the same right now, the time where you guys, six centuries ago, imagine trying to oppose Christianity and being confrontational about it. Galileo didn't fare well, and Bruno had even a worse destiny than him. But the world of Christianity some 6 centuries ago would have been. Imagine trying to do what you're trying to do right now 6 centuries ago.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm at a good time in history. I'm privileged to do it. So I want to spread information. Oh, snap. Pocket Locker with the last minute bomb drop. Just great show. I think it's important to distinguish between scientific uncertainty and doubt. I think those who doubt naturalism are unreasonable.
Well,
so double PhD over here and knows evolution. And so I don't know. Have you heard of Pocket Locker?
No, unfortunately not.
I got to connect you to him, Jay. So
really?
He's definitely, he just did a show recently. You got to go subscribe to Jay. If you want to enter evolution heaven, because there is a heaven for those who evolve and think evolution's the case. You got to go subscribe to Pocket Locker 86. You know what they say? If you don't, you'll evolve into some insignificant creature that it's chasing its own tail. And you don't want that. You want to procreate. You want to enjoy your endorphins and opiate receptors and all that good stuff. All of that stuff goes away if you don't subscribe right now. Anyway, shout out to Jay being funny.
Might want to invite him for a chat, but this is the going debate. Naturalism. Well, it follows Occam razor, isn't it? It's less steps, less convoluted. It's the simplest of all explanations. You can prove it. You can prove it. You can have evidence for it, and you can. This is the telling point for me. You can build technology on the back of empirical sciences that yield results. Evolution give rise to antibiotic. Antibiotic follows rules of evolution. If you're the bacteria that you're trying to fight through the antibiotic gets used to the antibiotic, that's why you got to change it every 30 days. It follows it. They evolve. So it's got usages. Naturalism and the sciences have got tech to back it up. Unfortunately, with the other claims, with the supernatural claims, there isn't any evidence. Even prayers don't work. Yeah. We've got evidence of prayers of people being prayed for in hospitals. They do exactly the same as those who have never been prayed for them, and sometimes even worse. Yeah, because they feel guilty that they were not recovering fast enough. So it's incredible.
Well, bless your soul. I appreciate everybody in the chat. Hit that like button, drop a comment, share this with someone who's not a naturalist, and those who are naturalists, of course. Be sure to subscribe to my friend Hani here and go check out his stuff. Drop comments because he's entering not only the English world where people speak English, which makes up less than 10% of planet Earth. He is in the Arabic world. He's actually directly speaking to people who are speaking Arabic. So he's actually communicating these ideas we discussed today in a world that this is actually very strange and foreign to many of them. Like we at least have had a century and a half, 2 centuries where it's just been commonly discussed. I'm not saying it hasn't been discussed in Arabic. It's just now, I think, really starting to try and make an impact. And he's on the front lines of that. So go support what he's doing as I do. And thank you so much, Hani. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Derek. I always enjoy your fantastic channel. I've been telling you off air as well. You've become one of the most important outlets out there to discuss biblical scholarship. Very, very. I mean, the amount of academics that come to your channel, the seriousness of the topics you provide, the way you're so professional about going about things. And I think this channel is not too far away from achieving that YouTube shield. I think I'm going to see it probably by the end of next year behind you.
Yeah, I hope so, man. I'll put it behind me, and it is an honor to be able to be alive and where I'm at. So thank you, Hani. I hope that you get a lot of subscribers from this, and I really appreciate the audience for all the support. Never forget, we are MythVision.